Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with classical music in trouble in the 21st century. Now, I'm not one of those naysayers, that everything's a catastrophe and everything's a crisis. And, we use the C word, crisis, constantly. Things are not in crisis. There's more music than there's ever been at a higher level of quality. There are fabulous recordings being made all the time, fabulous performances given of the standard repertoire as well as other things. But there are certain works, certain works that pose conceptual or executive difficulties that may have some issues in the century to come. And we're talking about some of those. Most of them, will come as no surprise, are the big romantic works, which are so aesthetically opposite to what seems to be our current zeitgeist. But there are also some that have some other things going for them, or other things going wrong with them. And one of them that I really love to talk about because I just adore the work, and I'm hysterically upset over what's happened to it, is Mahler's Second Symphony, The Resurrection. I mean, what an extraordinary piece this is. It has become, and this was happening before the 21st century, it has become a victim of its own success. In other words, it was never meant, or maybe it was, maybe Mahler wanted it that way, but it doesn't work when it's just a standard repertory piece. It has to be something special. It's the nature of the work. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. It takes up an entire concert all by itself. It requires a ridiculously huge orchestra, 2 soloists, a choir, an organ. I mean, it's a monster piece. You need specially constructed bell sounds and offstage brass people running around and 10 horns. And it's just nuts. It's wonderful. And we've completely forgotten that because all of a sudden everybody's doing it and everybody can do it. And it's absolutely impossible to equate a musical culture where community orchestras can throw together performances of Mahler's Second Symphony on a moment's notice, and they can, and they do, with a musical culture in crisis. It's not a crisis. It's a work that's the victim of the not crisis, of the excess in our musical culture. That's the problem. It's not some sort of lack of anything. It's an overabundance of everything, which is really fascinating. You can't say, as you could with, say, like Tchaikovsky and some other composers we're going to be talking about, that today's conductors just don't get the music. They're just not in sync with, the music's expressive demands. Mahler is incredibly popular. Everybody's playing him all the time. And there are plenty of conductors who are good at conducting Mahler. But that doesn't mean that they're going to deliver a festival quality performance of the Second Symphony. And it should always be a festival quality performance of the Second Symphony. You should never have anything else. I mean, I remember seeing Bernstein conduct his last series of Mahler 2s. Well, there were the ones where he made the recording, the DG recording with the New York Phil, which is stunning. It's my reference recording. I mean, it's big and it's huge and it's excessive and it ought to be, damn it, the piece is that way. But then there was a hidden series of Mahler 2 concerts that were really, really special in my memory. I'm not claiming those were better performances. I'm just talking about the specialness of the event, because Klaus Tenstedt had been scheduled to conduct Mahler's Fourth, and Tenstedt canceled every other concert he ever was scheduled for, and he canceled these. So at the last minute, Bernstein stepped in to do Mahler 2. I had tickets to all of the Tenstedt concerts, so I had tickets to all of these Mahler 2s. There were at least three or four of them. And he had Crystal Ludwig and Barbara Hendricks show up. They had done the recording a little while back. And those live recordings were amazing. But what really, really struck me about those performances was the fact that they were occasions. Now, that's harder to suggest in a recording, but it's not that hard because the music wants to be treated that way. It wants to be treated as a special event. And, it's one thing to, scrape together the resources to do the work. You could do it with fewer instruments than Mahler actually demands. But when you really do it the way he demanded, and Bernstein did it that way, he had offstage brass that was permanently offstage. I mean, they were just extras in addition to everything else Mahler wanted. And of course, they walked on, the 10 horns walked on for the end of it. And, he had these enormous church bell things that the New York Philharmonic has, and extra tubular chimes. It was give it every possible thing that Mahler demands, everything. And it was all there, spare no expense. And that was just in terms of the logistics, the physical outlay of the orchestra. The performance should be a spare no expense performance. It has to sound like everyone is giving 150%. And that's where we have the problem these days, because the piece is no longer technically impossible or technically challenging to many, many orchestras. They can just play it. They know it. They've done it before. You get the right people together. You say Mahler too, and they could probably do it without the conductor half the time. Now the piece is doable, and that has made it sound easy. And there are far too many conductors out there today who play this music who are not Mahler specialists. They're just good all-around conductors, and they do an all-around performance. That is, it's neat, it's clean, it's fleet, it's well executed, but it has no impact whatsoever. And for Mahler, too, not to have impact takes effort. I mean, you have to work at sucking the juice out of the music as hard as you possibly can, because that is a piece that's going to blow you through the back wall. I mean, it's the slightest urging. I remember the first time I heard it, it was that very strange Stokowski recording on RCA where he reorchestrates half of it and leaves things out and redoes all the percussion parts and the horns. And it's Stokowski. And it's interesting because his live recordings, he played the music more or less as Mahler wrote it, but in the studio, it was totally different. And even so, I just remember listening to it, just going, wow, because the sonic concept was just so stunning. It was such a feat of imaginative daring, this symphony to have such an uninhibited outpouring of sound from this ridiculously huge orchestra. It was the lack of inhibition in the music that just struck me. There was never a composer before who could just take so many people and say to them, go nuts, guys, go crazy, and let them. I mean, the big climax before the entry of the chorus and the finale, it's da 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 da, the tam in the back going whack, crash. Wow. What a thing that is. And I've heard performance after performance in the past couple of decades where these huge moments, they just don't have any sense of panache. The opening of the finale, Mahler marks it wild herausfahrend, I think, or something like that. Yeah, wild herausfahrend. It's a wild outpouring. I mean, he tells you what he wants, and he almost never gets it these days. I mean, there will always be, like I said, conductors who understand what a wild herausfahrend is, or whatever the hell he says. But few and far between, and getting worse. And it's because so many people are doing the symphony. It's being played too often and with too much facility and not enough attention to what its expressive message is. I mean, in that respect, the piece suffers from the general malaise directed at romantic music, that expressive excess, the emotionalism, is just not something that most artists today are prepared to embrace and to project and to express. And it's a terrible shame. It really is. But beyond that, there is this sense of turning this thing into a repertory piece where it's just not that kind of work. I mean, it's about the resurrection and eternal life and big things, big issues. It's a big deal. And if you're not going to play it like one, then you've got a real issue. You've got a real problem. And so I am concerned. I am concerned at the number of just terribly uninteresting performances of a piece that really ought to be one of the great sonic shockers in the repertoire. I mean, there are few pieces that are more splendid, that give you more spine-tingling moments, that can transport you into an entire other realm of being as Mahler's Second Symphony. But nope, it ain't happening. And, we'll have to wait and see where it goes. If the current Mahler 2 malaise gets worse, or if people finally figure out what's really going on there and start to attempt to realize it as effectively as the Mahler specialist conductors, those specialists, did in the 60s and 70s. We can only hope. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.